Caroline Leavitt. Hi Book Club, I'm Caroline Leavitt, and I'm hoping this works. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but at least I can be with you in the miracle of movies. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my book, For a Beautiful World, because it probably will answer some of your questions. I've been wanting to write this book since I was 17. I sat behind this girl named Nancy in study hall, and we used to talk all the time. And I used to talk about how I was going to go to Paris and be a writer and have all these adventures and romances. And she talked about how she was going to marry her fiance, who she had been engaged to since she was 14. I thought that was weird. Well, a year later, I got the news from somebody that Nancy had decided that she didn't want to be married after all, that she did want to go out and have adventures and have fun and all the rest. So she broke up with him. And he went into the kitchen and got a knife and stabbed her 47 times and then vanished. I was decimated. I couldn't figure out. Didn't anybody know that he was violent? Had she not seen this? And if she had seen this, why didn't she do something about it? I couldn't figure it out. Not for another 10 years. It was 2 weeks before my wedding when my fiance got up and said he didn't feel well. He had a glitch in his heart that was, it was in his DNA, and nobody could have known about it or saved him from it, including me. And he died instantly. I was just cataclysmic with grief. I didn't know what to do. So after 4 months of grieving so hard that the neighbors even called the police to make sure I was all right, I decided the solution was for me to date somebody new. So back then they didn't have Match.com or OkCupid or We Both Like Donuts.com, but they did have New York Magazine. And the back of New York Magazine, they had these 4-line ads because nobody could afford more than 4 lines. And I answered one, and I met this guy, and he seemed very nice and caring, and he kept me busy, and he talked about the future, and I grieved a little less, and I thought, well, this is okay for now. But then after 4 months, it started to get weird, and he started to get really controlling. One night at dinner, I reached for a roll, and he put his hand very gently on mine and said, "Oh, honey, you'd look so much prettier if you were just 30 pounds thinner." Now, I was 98 pounds back then, but when somebody who seems to love you talks very lovingly to you, you start to believe it. And it got worse. I used to have to sneak out of the apartment to go to the donut store and stuff my face with donuts. And once I turned around and I saw him watching me, he didn't want me to see my friends. He didn't want me to see his friends. And the final straw was, I'm embarrassed to say it wasn't until 2 years later, I was working on my novel and I noticed that a whole chapter was gone. And I turned to him and said, "What's the deal?" And he said, "Oh, it's better now, isn't it? I fixed it for you." And I blew up. I said, "How could you do this? This is mine. It's the only thing I have that's mine. You can't take this from me." And he drew himself up really tall and he said, "Caroline, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to just listen. There is no mine. There is no me for you. There's only us together." And that was when I understood my friend, and that was when I started writing the novel. I also wrote the novel because of my mom, who's sort of the prototype for Iris. My mom was one of these women who never believed in love. She was jilted at 19, and she married my dad on the rebound, who was this nasty, brutish, awful person. And nobody divorced back then, so she stayed. Plus, she had my sister and I. When my father died in his 50s, my mother refused to date. She just wanted nothing to do with men. She lived a long and wonderful life until she turned 90, and then she couldn't live in her house anymore. It was too much for her. So we got her into one of these independent living places, and at first, of course, she hated it. She called me every night and said, "How could you do this to me? This is so terrible." And I, of course, felt horrible because I love my mom. Well, after about 2 months, she called me, and her voice sounded different. I said, "Mom, what's going on?" And she said, "Oh, I'm in love, and for the first time." And I was gobsmacked. I said, "Really?" And apparently she had sat down at this table, and there was a man sitting next to her, and she had felt, you know what? I should take a chance. And she took his face in her hands and she kissed him. They were like teenagers. They were together for 4 incredible years. And then what happened is my mom got dementia, and Walter, her boyfriend, stayed with her. And then she got worse dementia, which actually was a lovely thing because she didn't know that Walter fell and died. My mom is 100 years old, if you can believe that. And to this day, when I call her up, I ask about Walter, and she always says, "Oh, I've just seen him." Thank you so, so much for reading my book and discussing it. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to email me and ask me. Thank you.